Welcome back, folks, to episode 3 for the Just Flight RJ Professional Series for Microsoft Flight Simulator. We're still in very low visibility and we're on our way to Birmingham. So here we are, we're still battling through the heavy cloud blanketing the UK at the moment, the snow and low cloud and this somewhat sort of rainy sleet conditions depending where we are in the country. Live weather, live time, flying off to Birmingham, and you can see we've almost settled into cruise. So if you've missed all of the cold and dark, all of the kind of SID and star inputs as well, through to cruise, go back and check out the first 2 episodes. This is going to focus all on our descent into Birmingham, the ILS approach, self-vectoring to final, could be very useful on VATSIM, and with that then, therefore, an ILS approach, landing, through to shutdown. So I hope you found the videos useful. This is a series that's been requested a lot recently, but I've just not had the time or the chance to kind of get it done, unfortunately, hence the slight delay. So as we briefed on the way out, we're flying into Birmingham on the HEMEL 1 Bravo arrival. So that's going to have us passing just near London Luton at HEMEL, the waypoint, flight level 220, which is what our cruise altitude is anyway. So we know we've got until HEMEL to get everything prepped. And from there, we're going to have to work pretty hard, because we're going to work through the arrival, down to waypoint Welling. From there, we're going to self-vector, so we're going to come initially kind of westbound to 50 degrees, probably, roughly. Just as a guesstimate, I'll make a little note there for you guys watching. So 250 degrees, and with that, we aim to kind of then route in towards the Honolulu VOR as best as possible. That's the altitude chord, 1 to go. Now you can see the Honolulu VOR is slightly offset somewhat, but we know we need to be at 2,000 feet by the ILS, which is about there. So we've got to be 2,000 feet with that extended centre line about here. And that's going to be about 10 miles. So we can put a fix ring in to really help us, and we're staying in this cloud by the looks of it through cruise, which is going to be quite interesting. So I'm going to leave all the heating systems on, I think, just for my own peace of mind. While I'm busy talking about stuff, I might miss an ice warning of some sort. Going to move the weather tilt to -3, and we're going to press fix. So we're going to go EGBB, just keep it simple, /10. So that's going to put a fix ring into Birmingham with a 10-mile range around it. So we know that's where we need to be at 2,000 feet by. So we've got HEMEL 220, from there working down to Pufax and Honolulu, and then it routes us through Oscott, because on the charts it wants us to go all the way to Oscott, round through Grove as a transition, and then from there you get vectored round, kind of like an extended downwind, round Honolulu onto final approach. But we're going to self-vector straight in, which does happen often at Birmingham. Now granted, we could use the Silver 1 Bravo arrival, but our routing for today doesn't take us that way, so we're not going to complicate it and talk about kind of changing the SIDs and stars. We're just going to leave it as it is and do a bit of self-vectoring. But we also need to know about the ILS configuration, the ILS configurations, the minimums and all that sort of thing as well. So turning our attention back to the charts once more, we can have a look at our Cat 2, Cat 3 ILS. And you can see we've got the Honolulu VOR 11365, which we can go ahead and tune. But we've also got the ILS, which is 110.1. So we're going to tune that to nav 1 and nav 2. going to flick that one across so I don't have to worry about the first officer side and turn it on. But I'm also going to pop that on and leave the Honolulu VOR active, and we're going to make sure we've got 326 selected and as our nav course as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has switched off the fasten seatbelt sign. You are free to move about the cabin.
Now we're at higher altitudes, we want to make sure the heading selector switch is set to the 10 position instead. One thing I forgot to mention during the climb out. You want to move that across from 30 down to about 10. In case we need to go to heading mode, it limits the angle of bank at these higher altitudes and higher speeds. So that's all done. If you've departed using any NDBs, you might have selected those accordingly like that. You want to make sure they're selected back to VOR, unless you are going to track NDBs for the approach, and you might want to select whichever one it is that you're using for the NDB onto the ADF needle tracker there. So that's all good. Decision altitudes back on the charts. It depends on what we're going to face. Now currently Birmingham is in low IFR conditions, winds 340 at 6, 1,800 metres visibility in snow, overcast at 300 feet, 0 degrees for the temperature and the dew point, recent snow and the QNH 909 hectopascals. So what I'm going to do is configure for a Cat 2 ILS, and we'll look to, when we get visibility with maybe the approach lighting system, we'll look to turn the autopilot off and hand fly that last couple of hundred metres perhaps. The runway visibility range, the RVR, is 300 metres, and we're going to go with this here. So rad out, we'll set 100. So decision height, we'll scroll that down using the buttons here. So a little left of that word PFD, you've got this rotary knob, and you're going to scroll that until we set the decision height that we want. Now I could directly set rad out 98, but I'm going to leave 100 just for an extra 2 feet. And then we can have a look at this. We can set the barrow, which is going to be 428. So once you've set it up as you wish, you can also now turn our attention to the pressurization system. The airport elevation at Birmingham is 340 feet. So we want to make sure on the landing altitude we get as close as we can get. So runway 328, airport elevation 339. If we set 300, that's closer than 400. And this is a completely IFR flight by the looks of it. We're just in cloud the entire time. So some of the things that you might notice as you get further on, we can pop things like data on as well if we want to, and it gives us the ground speed indications. We can click it again to cycle through. It gives us wind and wind direction. Very useful on approach actually, that, because it'll allow us to see roughly where the wind is coming from. And again, if you click it again, it gives you distances, various different bits of data for you to use and enjoy. The course selector switch there that's just in front of the speed brake that we mentioned earlier on in the previous episodes, when we get towards the ILS approach, we're going to want to make sure that is selected onto VL, and that's that VOR localizer selector switch there. Like the mode selector switch on the CRJ, unless you move that across, it's not going to necessarily track the ILS. And when we do that, you'll notice then changes on the nav display and everything as well. It looks like HEMEL is there in fact, so if we increase the range ring again, you can see HEMEL and then you can see a top of descent marker. Now because we're doing this with a bit of self-vectoring, the top of descent marker isn't where we want it to be. So from HEMEL we will begin our descent straight down to 2,000 feet, and we're going to use the banana in order to help us get down accordingly. Now the beauty of this aircraft is its clamshell speed brake, its air brake. It can drop like a brick. Getting thrown around a little bit here. I'll pop the seatbelt sign back on.
Please return to your seats and
just until we get through a little bit more stable air. And because we're not going to route through Oscott, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear that with the delete. And then I'm going to get rid of the discontinuity by selecting CF33, execute. And that's then changed our descent path. Now we can go back into fix, and what we can do is, you might notice on the, if I increase the range ring again, you notice that green line. So there's our 10-mile fix ring around Birmingham, but you've got that big green line coming out, and that's effectively like an extended centre line. Now what we want to do is select the runway heading here, so we can go 326/10 to overwrite what we've just put in, and you'll notice now when we go to increase the range ring once again, we get that extended range ring, extended centre line out the other direction. So the solution therefore is to put in the runway heading for runway 15 instead, which could be 146/10. And we're going to put that in as a second fix, because for a missed approach we can just look down and look for that green line in low conditions here. We've got bad visibility, so we can chase that green line to just fly runway heading if we have to, if things start to go wrong. But we can also use that green line coming out the other way in our direction to vector ourselves towards final approach nice and cleanly. So that's a really nice way of helping to manage the workload. It's worth mentioning, folks, if you're flying into London City Airport, as an example, you will need to select the steep approach button. And that will tell the aircraft that you're going to be flying a very steep approach, like the ones into London City, for example, and therefore it will change the way that it uses the ground proximity warning system, the glide slope warning system. All of that logic in the aircraft's brain when you're flying the approach needs to change, because it's a non-normal approach. It expects 3 degrees thereabouts, but if you're flying into London City and it's something crazy like was it 5 or 6 degrees, I can't quite fully remember, then that's what that mode select switch is for. And if you're also landing into, for example, London Heathrow, and you don't want to use flap 33, you can click that button there to say that you're going to land with flaps 24 instead as a maximum. And that once again will change the behaviour of the aircraft accordingly. So the missed approach procedure for this arrival into Birmingham is nice and simple. It's climb straight ahead to 3000, then as directed. Now, because we've already drawn that extended centre line, that's some of our workload solved for us, because we could just, initially with no autopilot, chase that green line on our nav display. Now, when we do touchdown, this aircraft has an auto spoiler system on it, in contrast to the 146, which doesn't. So as we bring the aircraft over that threshold, you'll hear an announcement for lift spoilers or the air brake, deploy the air brake. We're going to grab that air brake lever and pull it all the way out. And when we touch down, the aircraft will automatically deploy the lift spoilers for us. But it would be good practice nevertheless to pull the D10 out again to make sure the air brake lever goes into that lift spoiler detent, just in case the auto system fails for whatever reason. We've actually finally left that horrible cloud behind us whilst we were chatting there. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed this route. This is one of those routes that this aircraft is kind of specialist for. It's what it's made for. So now we're closing in on HEMEL. It's a good time to refresh our memory of the weather conditions. So we've got visibility of about 2 miles or 2,500 metres. That's pretty poor, isn't it? Overcast cloud at 300 feet above ground level. That's quite low. Low pressure of 909 hectopascals, and a low temperature as well. Winds 360 at 6. Should be relatively forgiving. That's going to give us a slight crosswind of a knot or so, but predominantly a headwind for us, which should help. And we can go ahead and hide that once more. The checklists down here are really handy as well, folks, so if you're working through it, you can kind of work through all of the different elements here. And by highlighting or hovering over certain areas, you can see there if I hover left it comes up at the bottom saying previous, on the right it says next. Down there it allows you to rotate. So I'm going to go next. And you can see we've got some preparation for approach, after landing checks, all that sort of stuff as well. Okay, so reaching HEMEL momentarily. We've got alt hold on, so I'm going to work this down to 2000. Naturally, if you had constraints through an arrival that you were flying to specifically, then you would want to set each of those constraints on the way down and step through the arrival procedure down towards the approach. But for the purpose of today, we're keeping it simple. We're going to go a continuous descent down to 2000 from HEMEL, which we're about to reach, with a little bit of self-vectoring. So I'm going to set the heading of 330. That's going to hopefully hit Buzad. I'm now going to bring the speed down to 270 knots. And with the L-nav mode selected, as we reach HEMEL, we should begin that turn north towards the next waypoint, and we're now formally in the arrival procedure. There's the turn. So with that in mind, we can go back to the flight deck. We want vertical speed on, and we're going to initially set 600, just gently increase that range, the vertical speed up. 1000. You can see on the primary flight display there the vertical speed that we're achieving at the moment, and we're going to set 2300, and we'll see what happens with the speed. I'm going to set a heading. I said about 250 earlier, didn't I? But we're going to just set 270 for now, and you can see that kind of cross section across towards the extended centre line, and we'll play it by ear from there. But the big thing is monitoring that descent. If we increase the range ring now, we should have, there we go, the banana, and that's showing us where we're going to reach 2000, and actually that's pretty bang on for us. So we're just going to monitor it. Don't forget we've got a deceleration phase as well to go through at 10,000 down to 250, and then once again as we get closer we need to bring that speed down nearer to 200 knots, 180 knots, so on and so forth. But we're prepped. We've make sure you've got your any sort of arrival frequency set if you're flying on VATSIM. If you're flying with ADFs, looking at NDBs and that kind of thing, make sure they're tuned down here, 1 and 2. And that you've set that pressure panel that we spoke about earlier. The 2300 looks pretty good. Speed's just about holding for us nicely. We're not quite at idle either, so we've got a bit more to play with as well if we need it. And you can see there we've got 47 miles to the Honolulu VOR. So about to go back through the clouds. Make sure your anti-ice systems are on, and because we're going through kind of an idle situation with the engines as well, we're going to put the anti-ice, the engines on as well, like so. And I'm going to put the continuous ignition on early as well because of the potential icing and the snow and everything. But there we go, actually quite a nice scenic flight so far, through tricky conditions, and there's a lot to kind of handle and deal with, but it gives us the focus of IFR, and it makes us stare at those displays, and actually it shows therefore how capable this regional aircraft is. We're working into this little layer of cloud. Looks like there's a break underneath us as well, in fact, so that's going to be momentary hopefully. keeping the range ring coming in as we descend. And as we said at Welling, we're going to start to route in. I said 250, and that's going to be kind of perpendicular to that line almost. But we'll set 270. We'll use a bit of heading mode to demonstrate that. Going to bring the vertical speed down to 2,000 foot per minute now. You can see that range there, bottom of descent marker, that advisory kind of VNAV element, moving a little bit. Go at 1,800 foot per minute. We'll bring that speed down to 250. Just trying to just constantly analyse what the aircraft is doing, being about 5 minutes ahead of it, so that we can predict where it's going to be in 5 minutes time, and then work everything, height, speed, direction, all of that stuff accordingly. Working the icing systems as you need it as well. Very, very thick cloud ahead by the looks of it, some dense conditions. Landing lights, runway turn-off lights, seatbelt signs for one last time.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has switched on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
Waypoint Welling. Heading select mode on. We've got 10 degrees, don't forget, so look how lazy it goes into that turn. So we can just increase that to about 25. Get that speed brake out. Look how quick it decelerates. We'll aim for 240. Managing that speed as best as we can. 1,600 foot per minute might be quite nice now. And we're lower than we think, don't forget, folks. We're going to get through that transition altitude of 7.5 shortly. And we're going to change the QNH to 909 hectopascals. And we're about to see how close we are to the ground. So with that in mind, I'm going to set 1,200 foot per minute. Make sure those air brakes are in. And you'll notice as you get lower, the aircraft doesn't want to decelerate as easily. .28 miles to Honley, but we're now going to flick across. So 110, 110. Got nav 1 and 2 both focused on the ILS now. And the courses are set. Scrolling down to 909 hectopascals. So that's set. Look at that loss in altitude now. 1,000 foot per minute should do us nicely. Bringing us to that 10-mile range ring. And we're going to select Toga Max now as the N1 limit. Going to turn the APU on. We'll monitor the APU start. Bring that range ring again. 10 miles till we start to line up. You can see the crosshairs there on the standby instrument starting to pick up the ILS as well. APU power is available. We got APU Gen on already. APU Air on. And I'm just going to turn the engine anti-ice off for now. Change in pitch there, because we've turned the systems off, we get a little bit more power back, the engines can idle a little bit more. Make sure that turn limiter is set back to 30. 5,000. 2 to go. And then we'll be at 3. That's our missed approach altitude. 290, just to keep bringing us in towards Birmingham. And we'll set 300 degrees for establishing on the localizer. There's our 10-mile fixed ring, nice and visible now, plus that extended centre line helping us get lined up nicely, especially now we've lost visibility. Super important that we have that situational awareness. We'll go to 800 feet per minute. 300. That's going to bring us right in now to the edge of that 10-mile fixed ring. It's where we want to be. Now as we get a bit closer, I'm going to move that to VL, and you'll notice now we get the indications. We still got the fixed ring and the extended centre line, but we now get the localizer needles. We also get the glide slope indications. It's super important we've got that selected, and you can do the same with the first officer's side if you want to as well. Now because we are getting close to that green line, I'm going to press VOR lock. It's going to arm the localizer. 1 to go. It's going to smooth that out to 550. We're going to press cabin call button. Seats for landing. APU air is on. Engine air off. We've got ice detection warnings now, so we'll leave the icing systems on as long as possible. It's all going on. And that's that cabin secure. .12 DME. Start to bring the speed down now. Really important we manage the energy. We need a bit of air brake for that.
Localizer alive.
And we're monitoring those call-outs. Keep going down to 180. Just leave the air brake cracked for now. .326 on the heading. Make sure that matches. And approach mode armed. Nav 2 for the autopilot's automatically engaged. We've got lock star. Glide slopes armed. Now acquired the localizer, so we are captured. Bring that range ring to 10. Level at 2 and alt hold, so what we can do is now set 3000 for the missed approach. We'll set 33 for the flaps.
Glide slope alive.
Flaps 18. Gear down. Set 160.
Glide slope captured.
Toga max is on. Keep the flap deployment going with speed. Flaps 24. VREF of 119. Coming up to 4 DME. So we're going to set 1, 2, 4 on the speed selector. Final check of the overheads. Everything looks as it should. APU's definitely on, we need that. Engine anti-ice is now off. We've got snow coming in sideways over.
Flaps 33.
Over the aircraft, flap 33 sets. That's full flap now.
1,000.
Check. Going to be very tight, this. See the ground. Gears down, 3 green, flaps 33 sets. Looking for those approach lights.
500.
Getting close to minimums. There's the approach lights. Auto throttle off. I'm going to set thrust myself. Autopilot off. My controls. Oh, there's a little bit of a gust there, just blowing us. Let's kind of see the slip there. Keeping it coming. Listening to the call outs from the first officer.
Minimums.
Air brakes out.
Keeping the power in as it is. Air brakes are out.
50. 40. 30.
Flare.
20.
Idle.
10.
Hold that pitch.
Ground idle. Spoilers yellow and green.
Gently let the nose settle.
Brake pressure checked.
And gently on the brakes. $60 knots. We're looking for our exit. I think there is one coming up, so just keeping the speed up. We don't want to be on the runway too much. And you'll notice there I didn't actually command the air brakes into the lift spoiler detent, but they've deployed anyway with that auto spoiler logic. Just as a demonstration of that. Braking now for the exit, releasing the brakes, following the yellow line off. 335 foot per minute. Nice on the centre line. Got to be slightly firmer than you would expect in conditions like this. The runway's wet. We want weight on the runway as quickly, as nicely as possible. And then we can close the speed brake, bring all the flaps back to 0. Left's clear, right's clear. Runway turn off lights off. Landing lights off. Complete this turn and do the next bit. Come in lucky by the looks of it, because it's just swept right in over the airfield. Continuous ignition off. Recirc fan onto fresh. For looking up, we can pop the strobe lights off. And then down here, transponder to standby. We can turn the flight directors off now. Flaps have gone up. So as we know, when it comes to parking, we'll pop the taxi lights off as we turn on into our stand. We've got stand 1-4 in this cul-de-sac here, not that we can really see it at the moment. Keeping it a bit slower for the turn. We know we've already got the APU online. Make sure your relevant icing systems are all off. Down 14. Got the landing lights and the taxi lights into the off position. It's boarding by stairs here because the air bridges are broken / deactivated in real life. Stop marker with GSX. A little bit more. There we go. Okay, so brakes on. Quick check of the overhead. Make sure all of this looks good for engine off. Certainly the APU and the packs being diverted via that. Turn wipers off, and then we can just click all of this into their respective detents, turn the engines off, brake temperatures there, you can see they're fine as well. And we click the placard down there to bring the aircraft tab back up, place the chocks in place, seatbelt signs can come off, beacon lights and the wing lights can come off accordingly as well. You can connect ground power if you wish. We're just going to open all the cargo and the passenger doors and then disembark using GSX. And it's going to go and do its thing. So there you are. I hope you've enjoyed this 3-part tutorial series, just focusing on the basics of flying the Avro RJ, or the JustFlight RJ Professional in Microsoft Flight Simulator, out of Jersey to Birmingham. Live weather, live time as I record this, with the UK blanketed in heavy snow, thick cloud, all that sort of thing. So it's been quite an interesting route, and I hope you've enjoyed watching it nevertheless. As always, hit like, hit subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments section below. Any tips that you might have, any preferences for any future videos, I'll be always keeping an eye on that comment section. But in the meantime, as always, thank you very much for flying with us, and I'll see you next time. Take care.